Though I was born with a congenital dislocated hip, so that's a disease of the hip joint. So it had always been there, but it didn't cause me any real problems as a child that I remember. It was only as I got into my 30s that I started to have problems with it. But I ended up having surgery on my hip. They had to break my femur, put a plate in, and then a few years later take the plate out. So I used to go to hospital for annual checkups until I was about 18. Fortunately, none of the surgery as a child do I remember, but my parents have certainly told me how horrific it was for them. So in my 30s, I found I was starting to have to reduce activities that I did. I've always been very active, had 2 dogs, but the distance I was able to walk the dogs was getting reduced and getting shorter and shorter. Activity classes at the gym, I couldn't do 2 classes back to back without it being painful. It was quite an ache rather than a sharp pain, but it was certainly starting to make me feel as though I was housebound and not carrying out a life that somebody who was in their late 30s should be carrying out. So I had a cementless hip replacement with a ceramic bearing. The hip replacement was a MiniHip, which is specifically designed to remove as little bone as possible at the time of operation, but also allowed the surgeon to recreate my own anatomy as closely as possible so that I got good movement from it at the end of the operation. So I had my hip replaced just under 3 years ago, and I've forgotten I have a hip replacement. So probably about 9 months ago now, I came off my mountain bike, broke my arm, and was only when I was at the hospital with the triage nurse and she asked about anything else did I suddenly say to my husband, my hip. That was the first time I'd actually thought about the hip at all, so it really is a forgotten hip for me. So I've always been an active person until I was slowed down by the problems with my hip, but I'm back to being an active person today. Within the recovery time, probably for the first 3 weeks, didn't think I'd get back to normal day-to-day activities, let alone any of the activities, cycling, running, that I might want to do. But actually when I look back at 6 weeks, I was on a static bike and probably doing cycling about 10 miles. So I certainly did get back to the activity quite quickly when I look back. But since having the hip replacement, I've taken up triathlon. So I now compete at sprint triathlon. So I'm doing swim, bike, run, all the training that goes with it. And I really don't think about the hip replacement at all. Don't be put off by a GP who might tell you hip replacements are for people who are over the age of 70. It certainly is an operation that can be carried out in younger patients. But I would certainly say find an orthopaedic surgeon, talk to them and take on board their advice. But it's definitely something that is worth doing if it's appropriate for you.